Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our church. Am I loud? I feel loud. Yes. Okay, good. Good morning. We have the most fresh announcement to give today. Jay just handed this to me. A notice to all the artists, some of them are here today. Please pick up your work from the gallery so that we can prepare for the next show. So don't leave it hanging around. That's from Jay. I do have some sad news for those of you who don't know. Longtime church member Carl Furlong passed away recently, and he had been at Oceanside Rehabilitation in Rockport. And Janet gives us this message that she knew that lots of church members came to see him almost every day, and she's very grateful for everyone who showed him so much care. And she says, we're planning a memorial event, and we'll let everyone know once those plans are set. And I'm sure some of you have seen over the past year or two that one by one there have been mosaics in the shape of fish being installed on the wall of the Americold building on Rogers Street in Gloucester. And the fourth and final one is being installed, and it includes an image of our church. And the theme for this last mosaic is spiritual power. Reverend Janet has been invited to speak at the installation on Thursday, August the 31st, between 4 and 6 p.m. So that, if you're interested in going. And finally, coming up, we have the water ceremony on September 10th. Each year we have a ceremony during our worship service to mark the end of summer and to celebrate our return to community. We do this by collecting water that we have brought with us from travel or from vacation or any event that has held a special meaning for us over the summer. Please be thinking about where you might like to collect water and bring it with you to church on September 10th. Remember, you only need a small amount. Thank you.
It's a tradition of Unitarian Universalist congregations to open their services by lighting a chalice, symbolizing the search for truth, community, and love. If you're watching from home, please light a candle along with us as Myrn lights our candle and we repeat together the covenant that we share with one another. This is printed in your order of service. In the light of truth and the warmth of love, we gather to seek, to sustain, and to share. Life is a gift for which we are grateful. We gather in community to celebrate the glories and the mysteries of this great gift. We also light today our peace candle, sending out a special prayer for peace in Ukraine and everywhere else that it might be needed. Good morning, and welcome to our annual poetry service. This is the third August that I've had the pleasure of leading it. The first, in 2021, was stitched together from videos and live readings on Zoom. Roger and Jeremy will remember this well. Remember the opening photo of the church with the bells ringing in the background on Zoom? That was a long time ago, and yet it seems like only yesterday. Many of us sitting at home and around the country on that occasion read poetry that reflected in some way on the pandemic experience that we were all going through at the time. Last year we were live, and several of us read poems that tried to answer the question, why read or write poetry at all? Which I hope was very convincing. Today, our service will again be led by many congregational voices. But this time, most of our readers will not be ventriloquizing other poets, but are themselves the poets, reading their own work. Hence the title of the service, Gloucester UU's Write Poetry. I was so thrilled as I started to put this service together to hear from so many people that yes, they write the occasional poem, and yes, they'd be willing to share them with the congregation. This is a brave and a wonderful gift they're giving us today. If you write poetry and ever have to read it aloud, you'll know what it feels like. In the words of Mary Oliver in a 2015 interview, I believe poetry is very old, it's very sacred, and it wishes for a community. It's a community ritual, certainly. And that's why when you write a poem, you write it for anybody and everybody. It's a gift to yourself, but it's a gift for anybody who has a hunger for it too. As for the question in the title of the service, what's in a poem, I think I can answer that in advance. The heart and soul of the poet, and through listening, of the community around the poet. Thanks to all of you readers in advance for sharing your hearts and souls with us today. And special thanks to Andy Soul, our organist, who not only sought out art songs for inclusion today based on the individual poems that are going to be read, but then transcribed them for organ to play for us today. Just an amazing effort. The service will, as a result, flow from words to music, to words to music. You should have received this booklet when you came in the door. If you didn't, please raise your hand and the ushers will bring you one. In it, all of the art songs that Andy will be playing, the lyrics for them are included in italics, and then all of the words of the poems that will be read are also included in the order of the service. We hope it'll help you to read along with the music and the poets as you listen. And also, we hope it will provide renewed pleasure of rereading everything at home. Myrn and I will be reading several poems by a member of the congregation who passed away last September, Rufus Collinson. Rufus was a lifetime resident of Gloucester and a longtime member of this church. After graduating from Gloucester High in 1964, she worked as a reporter for the Gloucester Daily Times, and for 25 years was the Director of Publications for Project Adventure, a program for kids based on learning through, what else? Adventure. She published 2 books of poetry, Turning the Stones and Traveling to You, and was selected to be Gloucester's Poet Laureate from 2010 to 2014. Those who knew her well could add a lot to these brief remarks, but let's allow her poems today to speak for her. I'll begin with the title poem of one of her books, Traveling to You, which is not in your order of service because it was a sort of a late edition, let's call it. But you can Google it and get the words anytime. Traveling to you. It's you I run to with every sighting, every comprehension, every incredulity, every intimation of love. I imagine that one day we will run to one another the way we once ran up the stairs to home, wild with news. For now, I hope that we meet here in these still, small words. Our first group of poems today fall loosely under the rubric, To Everything There Is a Season.
Hello, I'm Isabel Sloan, and I wrote this poem over 30 years ago, believe it or not. It's called For a Gardener Dying. Don't die in the spring, when purest pink and yellow and white make paradise of everything. Don't die in June, when peonies are at their full. That would be too soon. Don't go in the bright fall, when orange maples make the sky most brilliant blue of all. Nor in the frozen winter, when biting cold winds bring intense desire for spring. But leave us lonely in November, when beauty's old and worn and dying, and there's nothing much for which to hope, but only to remember.
My name is Alison Rowell, and I'm reading this for Joanne Hart, She wrote this poem about one of the animals. You know, she lives on Rampart's farm. She's a member here. But at the moment, she is with a sick goat and waiting for the veterinarian. Interestingly, the goat is mentioned in this poem. So I'm going to read for Joanne. Winter Burial. He met her at the gate with the cart, and she covered the animal with a sheet. They pulled together to the place behind the barn. The ground was frozen. They laid their friend on the hard earth, adjusting his head, his yellowed horns ridged with years. She tucked the sheet around him, collecting his dignity. It's a dirty business, storing a body for the winter. They carried the black box and covered him, then stacked heavy stones on that against the predators. Snow was coming. They might not see the fox for a long while. Say a prayer, he said. I have no words. We'll write a poem then, later. I don't write poetry, she said. You will, he said. The ground opened in March, a sudden violent thaw. They peeled away wet leaves made dark by time. The shovels cut through fibrous roots like matted fur. Runners, hard as shins, were severed. The water table was high. Life coursed beneath their feet. They removed the stones, then the black box, letting it fall aside. The body was fresh, as if they just found him lifeless in the barn. The morning sun, a shaft of dusty light. Worn hooves and gloved hands met for the unseemly haul to the pit, which swallowed him whole. Then relief. He is where he was meant to be. She tilted his horns to display his glory and said a prayer. God. Nothing else came. When the hole was filled, they went to the shed for rakes to smooth over what had been done. On return, a goat was standing on the grave, staring down, comprehending or not, as his friend got ready to do the hard work of becoming one with the land.
Good morning. I'm Karen Myatt. I'm not a member yet. Just call me your local hanger-on or groupie. One day in the 4th grade at the Heathbrook School and Elementary School in Tewksbury, I was washing my hands at the sink in the girls' restroom. Even now, I can recall the strong paper mill smell of those scratchy brown towels and the bitter scent of antiseptic they used to clean the restrooms. Two classmates, Linda Prentice and Susan Crawford, walked in. Linda was like a fluffy little bluebird. She had banana-curled, perfectly coiffed auburn hair and a voice that dripped sugar. She perched on the edge of the sink right beside me. Susan slinked into the corner on the other side of me. She was tall and lanky with a twiggy haircut and those big doe eyes that graced those awful velvet paintings we had in the 1960s. With the sweetest voice, Linda addressed me. "You know, Karen, you don't look Jewish." Susan nodded like one of those statues that we used to have in the dashboard of those 63 Chevys. The words hung in the air for a moment and then were written like neon across the top of the mirror. Stunned, I repaired back into a bathroom stall, sat on the toilet, and sunk my chin into my hands. What did Jewish look like? Those girls attended St. William's. Did they look Catholic? Was there a special birthmark they had? A tiny freckle in common? Was there a secret code for Catholics? What did it all even mean? I knew in the moment that it was a question I would not be bringing home to Mother. Over the next half dozen years, things did not improve between me and my classmates. At age 15, I wrote a poem. I wrote it to them. It won a National Writing Award. When it was announced over the PA system by the principal, they all clapped politely. Apparently, they didn't realize it was all about them. Alone. With all, I am alone. But alone, I am all. To hear the creaking of my bones at rest, so brittle as I fall. Deep dark into the night, I awaken to hear each solitary breath, escaping from the world outside that shuns the thought of death. Alone, in silence, so simple a thing, though it frightens them to hear that alone is where I choose to be. The thought, too much to bear. And friends, they don't mean unalone, though it seems so from outside. Friends, unfriends, hypocrites, idiots. Alone is where I hide.
I'm reading a poem today by Rufus Collinson from her collection, Traveling to You, which I think many of us in this church have, that book. And this was one that stood out to me a lot when I was looking through it recently with Pat. Learning from Miss Lee. For Virginia Lee, West Parish School. When you were talking today about seeing the landscape, dreaming up exercises for teachers to help children see, I thought of the time my first grade teacher, Miss Lee, my first true hero, who died when I was in 5th grade of a brain tumor, took us out to the pond behind the school. It seemed blissful to leave the corridors behind, to step into the blossoming air, swinging giant tin cans on string handles, to see mud on Miss Lee's knees as she showed us how to cast our buckets out and drag in a load of pond. Back in the classroom, she dipped a dropper into the bog we'd fetched, and she gently squeezed a tiny plop the size of a tear on a mirrored slide. One by one, we stepped up to the microscope and had a look. My eye filled with a world of swarming, swimming things, alive, alive, alive. I wanted to never stop watching the lives I never knew existed. And I have never stopped believing in the infinity of Virginia Lee and the secret inhabitants of everything I see.
Our second group of poems are loosely on the theme of love, what the world needs now.
Good morning. I'm Holly Tangway. I have 3 short poems to offer you. The first I wrote on the eve of my wedding to the love of my life, Bob Tangway, and the second 2 I wrote in the days and weeks after his death. Clear ice. Winter-bound and used to lingering night, the yearling doe steps out, head down, seeking the smell of not quite frozen ground. Then, in the clear, she stands and measures time, warming herself on the view of the coming dawn. All that she remembers was like this: grazing through silent meadows in the dark, bedding under hemlocks in the day. The scant snow melted round her for a space. She has forgotten tender grass and the feeling of strong sun along her back, but not the beauty of water running under clear ice or the taste of winter buds spiraled tight to last against the frost. Into the still, cold clearing comes a buck. The doe, so long a solitary seer, is seen and quickens to a vision of bounding herds on soft earth, breathing vapor in the chill, transforming the meadow with their two-ness. Together, they compound the growing light. Small hurts. Oh, love, I say aloud, though you're not here. You are always beyond my finding now, but the small hurts of caring for you linger on my hands. A pink line singed on the back of one from checking the baked custard you couldn't eat. A swollen place between the knuckles on the other still hurts when I grip tight. Was it from clasping the cloth beneath you to raise you in the bed? Or later, from moving things back to where your bed had been? You were gone from my sight, like your old car from the drive. But these small hurts remain. You are not yet gone from my hands. Treasures. Verses I wrote to you before we wed, decades ago, found among your treasures in the bottom of your dresser drawer. Not once in all the intervening years did I pen poetry for you. Loved, known, held in the universe of us, there was no need. Now the verses come again, voice of a yearning kindled by your loss of you, the one I love, but not of the love itself. That is safe among my treasures in the bottom of my heart.
I'm glad we're celebrating Rufus among the poems here. She was a wonderful friend of mine, member of this church, and she wrote me a poem when my beautiful partner, Steve Myers, who was a member here, some of you still remember Steve, and she sent me this poem, and she put a note on it and said, "Alison, I lit a candle for you at church yesterday and read this. Please know how much we are all thinking of you. With love, Rufus." And this is the poem. For Alison, we will always remember the two of you at coffee hour. We will remember entering the circle of your love. Steve nodding and smiling, always grateful. And you standing by, noticing everything, shining and tender and strong. And now, moving from that sacred place, we will carry on this love together.
Good morning. I'm Diane Faisler. My poem is written in the voice of my dog, who was with us in the 90s. Teddy's Blues. Oh, sweet mama, how I'd die for you. Don't you know? My life is endless hunger, defined by your comings and goings. Your I'll be back. Your I'm home. Stay with me, only me. I'll teach you all you need to know. How to pine sweetly and beg politely or not. Live the moment and bestow devotion. Am I not irresistible? Eyes only for you. All the rest is blanky stuff. Forgive me the gnawed slippers, stolen napkins, cookies begged. Those sops don't touch my loneliness. Only make my jaws ache with wanting you more. Stay, mama, stay. Don't talk to me if all you can say is, bye-bye, be back. My nose won't leave the floor.
We gather in community each week to seek meaning in our daily lives, to pause to worship the highest we know. Let there be an offering to sustain and strengthen this place that is sacred to so many of us, a community of memory and hope, for we are the stewards of what has been handed down to us by those who have gone before. To support this church and all of its ministries, this morning offering will now be gratefully received. Thank you for your generosity. Our last group of poems is a group of poems about our city of Good Voyage, Gloucester, Mass.
My name is Lucille LePage, and Jim Seavey, who's away today, asked me to read his poem and wrote from Chichen Itza. I would mention that despite the title, the primary setting of the poem is New Hampshire rather than Chichen Itza, but the poem beautifully, of course, connects the two places. And Jim emailed me these brief notes of introduction to his poem. He says, in 1988, I was at a week-long series of workshops at Robert Frost's estate in New Hampshire while Gail was visiting her parents in Vermont. One workshop I signed up for required a poem written between sessions, and this poem was the result. A few months earlier, we had been given a week in the Yucatan where we visited the Mayan ruins at Chichen Itza. Old roads seem the same, no matter the ground or vegetation growing over, with dried ruts and rusting junk in random spots alongside. We push ahead in the heat to flee mosquitoes with, this trip, no jungle rain at the end, no jungle ruin at the end. We talk about our children, your parents, their 40 years of his need to be believed, hers to be understood. You walk ahead, or I, side by side, and met here in the middle of a rare week apart. There is a slight dampness to our skin, like memory of lovemaking. in this oppressive air, unusual in these New Hampshire hills. We duck under a fallen tree, walk on to find on the uphill side a sunken well, worn down through glacial fragments, like the sandstone wells of Chichen Itza, we agree. Less likely to have human skeletons below, though here it's hard to tell what deeds long winter hides or what spring demands. Today there's no rime on the mountains, invisible in the mist. On the back porch of the guest house, munching fruit and cheese, chatting with passers, we hang on the edge of the world, nothing to exhume.
The next two poems in your bulletin are by Willie Alexander. Willie wasn't able to be here. He's at the bedside of a friend who's ill. And honestly, I know I could never do them justice. So I am going to invite you to read his poems here, and while Andy goes on to the next piece of music, and just want Willie, if he's watching, to know that we're thinking about him. This poem's title is Sea Smoke by Rufus Collinson. When I first moved to Gloucester, or first started coming to Gloucester, I was so amazed on a practically hourly basis at the things I saw here in nature. But I think the biggest shock came the first time I saw sea smoke. So I love this poem. That's why I'm going to read it. We awaken in the cold this morning to find that the sea has become enchanted and is rising to the sky. Gulls shine all prismy within the mist and ultimately lift up too, wings becoming light. Everything is rising. Even on the hardest day, there is transformation.
our final poem today is another one by Rufus, Celebrate Gloucester. Let us go to a high place and look out. Gulls soar and drift like our spirits. Trees reach out and spread their dapple and their shade. Small birds twitter in droves like the beauty of our distractions. Hills emerge and rocks lounge like beached whales. The land curves and the sands glisten. We see everything that keeps and holds, encloses coves, forts, quarries, cellars, the bell tower, breakwater, harbor ramps and wharves and pilings, hulls and masts and lines, vessels of pleasure and provision, rooftops, widow walks, chimneys, the language and history of the neighborhoods, the salt of our current lives. We dwell in the spirit of all that swells and beckons and provides. The shining harbor, steeples, lighthouses, Our Lady of Good Voyage, our man at the wheel, coffee shops, bars, restaurants, the aroma of the nations, the endless call of the sea and promise of the horizon. The spirit of Gloucester surrounds and teaches us how to create love from loss, how to look far out and find the possibilities within, how to live close and always see the distant horizon. Celebrate Gloucester and yourself, all that you have become within the shining city of your soul.
And now we'll extinguish the chalice. The words for extinguishing the chalice are in the order of service. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. May the tide that is entering even now the lip of our understanding carry you out beyond the face of fear. May you kiss the wind, then turn from it, certain that it will love your back. May you open your eyes to water waving forever, and may you in your innocence sail through this to that.